There's just 1 minute to showtime.
The engines are on.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? With capital, the heart of their design. When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no. Which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
Okay. It always has to be a dance to get us back onto the air after the theme, but we're here with us. It's great. We're glad to be here on this Tuesday after morning. We're on two different sides of the country, so after morning, I think is about what we are. Anyways, thank you for joining us for another episode of Social Contract, whether you're here with us live or you're watching at your leisure from our archives. We appreciate you. We're glad to have you with us. I am, as always, joined by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Jared.
What's going on, everybody? Yeah, we're not too far from switching back time zones, aren't we? Well, I guess it's August, so what does that happen in September? I live somewhere where Arizona doesn't do daylight savings time. It was funny how, just last year, they're like, we're going to stop doing daylight savings time. That's what we're going to do to really bring this campaign season back to earth, is re-bring up daylight savings time legislation, get everybody on board. One thing we can all agree on.
Yeah, it's such a mess.
Sick of daylight savings time.
They promised it and they took it away. And so we're gonna have to be figuring that one out again pretty soon. Right in the beginning of November, I think is when it happened. So get everybody all nice and confused and compliant because they're all dying of heart attacks on Monday morning when the hours are wrong. We'll have plenty of time to complain about that when it gets closer to the time. Because it's horrible and everyone hates it. So yes, we have a packed show for you today where we have a little bit of political, updates that we're going to talk about, but we're going to kind of try to shift off of it a little bit and talk about some other things going on in the world that aren't just America. So we have some interesting stories we've been looking into, and but we have to talk about something that did happen just recently, which was that RFK Jr. continues to dishonor his family name and has dropped his stupid campaign, which was stupid, obviously, but was drawing a lot of support from liberals and conservatives. They both were like, this guy fucks. Like, this guy gets it. And it's like, this guy does not get it. Like, this is like the worst guy. But he decided that he was going to beg both parties for a cabinet position. And it probably went something like, hey, Democrats, can I be in the cabinet? And they were like, LOL, no. And he's like, hey, Republicans, can I be in the cabinet? And they're like, yeah, sure, okay. And he's like, done, I support you. And then that scene. That's how I think that's how that went. And he's not getting anything. He's not getting shit. What does Trump suddenly deliver on promises? So he went to shill for the RNC, the RNC for Donald Trump, and to let everybody know what a great dude Donald Trump is, based on his good credit. So that's where we are in contemporary news right now.
RFK has been an interesting thing. Like, he his existence and campaign reached my brainstem kind of when I was already disillusioned with like the major party system. It was already post Bernie and all that, and I already had firmly in my mind that any candidate that gets any kind of traction can't actually be threatening to bring about any kind of meaningful change, because if they were, they would get nowhere near power to begin with. And then
Right.
that kind of explains why, like, it's like a lot of candidates. Like, it kind of feels like how I did about like Pete Buttigieg when he first shows up. You're like, oh, cool. His like initial stats make me inclined to want to like him, and then you learn more and more about him, and then you like him less and less. Where when RFK Jr. you first start hearing about him, you're like, wow, he's a Kennedy. He's from one of these political dynasties, so he has some kind of chance of doing something. They have to kind of listen to him when he says shit, and he has a mostly anti-war message and a lot of like common sense things. And then, oh, but he loves Israel and has been going on tour with Rabbi Shmuley. I can't remember his freaking name. One of the meme rabbis who like does videos
God.
about like, oh, look how fucking crazy I am.
Yeah, look at how insane I am, and also my entire family.
He goes
So
around. He literally walks around Brooklyn just like trying to start fights with people to be like, hey, what did you say? I didn't say anything. Come over here and talk to me about Israel. And he's like, oh, get away
right,
from
that
me,
guy
Rabbi
is
Shmuley.
nuts. Like, but here's the thing: like, I've known about him for like a long, long time. Like back in the day, he was a pretty respected kind of.
He's been around.
I don't want to say like I don't know, just dude. Like he's been around a long time, and he had a pretty respectable reputation maybe back in the '90s and the aughts.
He
And
wants to
then
eliminate like the CIA and FBI, and you're like, that sounds like a thing that makes sense to me.
right, right, and like he was sort of one of these, he was like a correspondent. Like they talked to him on shows and
Yeah.
and news and stuff like that. And
You'd be like, what's wrong with his voice? Why does he talk like that? And then you'd forget about him, and he'd come back.
yeah, and then like the thing of it was is he kind of like, and he was very well connected as well. And there was a lot of he kind of worked as like kind of a, I guess, I don't know, like if you'd say like spiritual aid, but like, or sort of spiritual advisor to a lot of people, even people who weren't uh you know Judaic people. Like he and Michael Jackson were actually very close, had a pretty close friendship. But that was before Michael died, and that was a really long time ago now. So it's like that's what I'm talking about. Like things have changed definitely. So and Michael had a tendency to like bring in lots of people, different interesting points of view people around him. But the thing of it is that like now that things have changed, and I think social media has had a big impact on that, because you could just go on and just like on TikTok now and just say whatever crazy shit you want to instantly, and people are going to be seeing it and doing it. And I think that people like that really feed off that shit. Like whether you're like just doing a regular cooking video or posting a video of your cats or saying insane fucked up shit, like whatever. Like I think people really get addicted to that instantaneous feedback loop, and then it grows and grows and grows, and they're like, okay, this is working, so I'm going to keep going with it. And then now we end up with wherever he is now. But that's not the first time we've seen people go off the rails who were fairly respectable figures, and then like kind of in this new era of say whatever you want whenever you want as fast as you can. Things have really changed. So and also he's also got kids that do the same thing. They live in Israel, or some of them do. I'm not an expert here. I'm just saying I've seen it. I've seen some of it. He's got kids that are also like, there's like a daughter that promotes herself as like a sex guru or something, and he's weirdly all about it. Well, I guess it's not that surprising, to be honest.
There's a lot of just rich family weirdness, like things that only rich people seem to be doing. But yeah, very like heavily pro-Zionist, but at the same time, like if you were like a libertarian leaning, but still wanted to call yourself a Democrat, like he met this niche. And for a bit, like especially when like last year, or early in the campaign, he was polling at like 11-20% even sometimes. Like, wow, this guy he was considering, he was trying to run within the Democratic Party. And as he's come out saying recently, like, yeah, dough, we all know, but he's like, man, this primary system is so crooked and insane. Like they've brought a million lawsuits against me to try and sue me off ballots. And
Right.
everyone in alternative media is like, yeah, that's what they do to everyone. Like if they don't want you to have the job. When people talk about, quote, rigging elections, that's the rigging that actually takes place. Not like nobody runs up with a gun and steals a bunch of ballots in a box and runs into a different, like, that's not how elections are stolen. It's all of the nonsense rules where, oh, you want to run here, you better get 10 million signatures, or you better have the endorsement of one of the two parties who will never put forth someone who will be a radical and actually change, or not even a radical, a mild reformist is not even acceptable. Look at
and
AOC.
then they'll still put the parties will still try to sue you off the ballot, which has worked in the cases of Jill Stein and Cornel West.
It's part of why Jill and them, even if everything about, if you don't believe that the Green Party is CIA co-opted and being intentionally led down a road of moronic decisions, which is a thing I believe, even if they were doing everything entirely honestly, you're not getting on the ballot. Bernie Sanders was too much for them. They moved heaven and earth to get Bernard Sanders, a guy who goes along with everything they want to do. He was too much. So RFK was never going to get anywhere near the thing, and now he's going around. Geez, I sound like RFK with my throat now. He's going around with his throat, and he's been trying to spread the news that
like
getting
genetic
in on
condition or something. I've heard him discuss it before, but
I thought he had like a surgery. I thought he just like had a tracheotomy at some point or something. I haven't
No,
looked
I think it's a condition. I mean, I've not really tuned in too much to like what he does in his life. It's just too much. It's like, is there not enough bullshit happening at this point? So
I think it seems that he was a lot like he's now reached the point where it is 100% certain that man, they're not even going to let you pretend to. I mean, Jill Stein isn't on the ballot in New York. It's like, great. So of the two mega states that you've got to be on if you want to do any kind of anything, California and New York, she's not on the ballot in New York. So like it's okay. So that's not in any, even if you're a third partyist, nothing's going anywhere with that.
And in the case of, I can speak on. I was actually previewing the Indiana ballot the other day. And I've mentioned this before in the show. She did not make it onto the Indiana ballot, which wouldn't make any difference at all because this is like a Trump stomper state, like 100% Trump. Like this is like no other way that's going. Period. End of story. So but this is a state that like you can only write people in who are already accepted to be on the ballot. They may not be like listed, like choose A, B, or C, but you can't. Vote for them if they're, or you can't even if you write them in, it won't count. Like you cannot they have to be approved to be on the ballot. Then that's the end of it.
That reminds me, there was a whole like RFK thing. I think it was Virginia, maybe it was North Carolina, South Carolina, wherever the first primary was. They had this weird rule because it's the DNC, it's just a private corporation, they can do whatever they want. But they made a rule where it's like, all right, RFK, if you set foot in this state to campaign, you trigger a new rule we wrote, which is we can just deny you any delegates that you might win anywhere. Right. If we like, it's seriously, it's like playing with a 5-year-old who doesn't want to lose, so they just make up new rules for you. Hey, Jill Stein is on the ballot in Arizona. I don't know, vote for her or don't. I really do not care. I think RFK was allowed to kind of continue. I'm just riffing now. I think he was allowed to continue campaigning and have the campaign that he had when he was assumed to be a Trump spoiler. Because in the same way that they'll talk about how Jill Stein is going to be a spoiler, whatever the hell that means, for Harris, RFK definitely was not pulling any votes away from Harris. Those are people who would just be voting for Trump, but they're like, I don't want to do that, so we'll go with this guy who seems to know a little bit more what he's talking about. And that's all kind of come to an end now. Have you noticed the sudden flood of all these RFK crazy ass stories? He's leaving bears in Central Park, and it's like, well, this was all available information a year ago, but weirdly, that was sat on, wasn't it?
So yes, yeah.
As soon as he's like, I'm joining Trump, they're like, here's all the shit we were.
Sudden wait for the info dump. So yeah, it's stupid. It's a stupid situation all the way around. So that's where we are there. I mean, that's probably pretty much the end of the story, really. I don't really foresee this, he's going to go off into the sunset. Maybe he'll run again at some other point. But as far as
have you seen this that I just saw today for the first, where is it? It says Showtime. It goes to presentation?
No, it's at the bottom.
Almost.
Here, is this what you're looking for?
It's a different spot for me. That's the one. Where the heck Restream audio work? Don't show me Restream audio.
No. This one. No, damn it.
Let me re-screen
Okay,
share.
yeah, pull your article back up.
I hit the right one, dang it. There it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Do you see, RFK faces call for investigation into claim he chainsawed whale's head off.
Yeah, and this was like based on shit his kids said. Like Like, they don't care. They hate this guy.
That's from today. This is an article from today. I heard about the bear, but like, what the?
Yeah, no, this one's batshit. This one is just like, God damn it, just stop.
From
Fucking
a
stop.
2012 interview where all right. Like I know nothing about that story, but it's just I love all the allegedlys in it to begin with. But like, yeah, that's all you're gonna be
It's
hearing
the
about
ultra
RFK
rich,
Jr.
ultra connected Illuminati type fucking people do. Except for some reason, people have noticed when he has done
He
this
probably
shit.
did. That's the thing. I'm not even saying he didn't chainsaw a whale's head or whatever the hell. Rich people do weird shit because they're bored, because they're just rich and sit around. Like,
They
why
have
do you think
everything they want and they need. They don't have to work for anything, so they just do whatever the fuck they feel like. And if
Hunter
there's
Biden's
a
a
law
crack?
against it, then they just treat it like a fine. Like, okay, don't park here. No, I'll park here and I'll just take the ticket. Like, they just, like, that's a very small example. But they just do what they want. And, that's the thing. This guy, I mean, like, now that all these stupid stories are out, the smear campaign and all that, like, there's nothing really more to say about it. Like, their story has come to a conclusion unless he tries again to run, for something or a smaller office later, or, in a couple of years, or in the next 4 years, he hops back on. I don't know. But
It does throw the smallest like kink into my whole into my certainty that Kamala Harris is going to win. I'm still very sure that she is going to win, but I kind of anticipated RFK staying in it as an independent till the end, and he would pull some, not even pull votes from Trump. It's people who never would have voted for Kamala. So now I don't know.
Well, maybe. I don't know. There was some kind of weird liberal faction that was sort of like, this guy gets it. But,
that's what a lot of the stories are about now, where it's like Trump adds RFK, Tulsi Gabbard to transition teams, like a whole bunch of Democrat operatives. When I say Democrats, I don't just mean like random voter people. I mean people who like work within the apparatus.
Right.
Like a whole bunch of them are now joining the Trump campaign, and he's talking actively about like, I'm going to recruit all these random Democrats, which kind of fits into my overall storyline of the parties have kind of switched sides, where now the center left party is the Republican Party and the center right party is, well, I would say the far, far, far right party are the Democrats. So I don't know. I guess it's two different right parties.
Yeah, well, at the DNC, that's why they came out and they looked very authoritarian in the way that they were dressed. It wasn't a mistake that way.
They're out there like, we're the greatest country in the world,
yeah,
America,
they're parading
USA.
Cops around with obviously, I couldn't even find a cop with a good reputation to come and say anything.
We believe in the law, and it's like,
right?
what
Yeah, they're doing
party
this law
is
and
this?
order shit. This Israel shit. That's why they're going hardlining it, because they have decided every outlier, like the left or like the undecided middle, the RFK people or whatever, those are a small enough percentage of people to ignore, and they're trying to court people, the never Trump Republicans. They're trying to say, look, we can be the bigger asshole here. We can be the asshole that you want, but we're just not the Trump kind of asshole, right?
They're the George W. Bush type of asshole. Like, if you loved the George W. Bush era.
Completely rehabilitated and is like some cutesy little Michelle Obama, like, meme guy or whatever. I don't care for shit.
Yeah,
whatever.
if you're like a Romney Republican, you're currently voting for Kamala Harris.
Right,
it's very,
exactly.
very weird.
That's the bet that they have taken, that they could court that bigger, and like I said, they've got strategists, they've got people figuring out things years in advance, whether or not they end up being correct. But that's what you pay these think tanks and these things for, is to figure this shit out for you strategically, and that's who they've decided to bet on. They're not worried about the outliers. They've already kicked everybody who's not going to vote for them to the curb. They're now trying to court the never Trump Republicans by being more Republican. But whatever, we can go on about that forever. But we actually have a labor story that we want to discuss a little bit.
That would be a good time.
Yeah, because that's what's more important. The workers are more important. It's probably workers that are listening to this or seeing any of this stuff. So another unsurprising version of events. I'll let you take this one. This is what you wanted to talk about.
I was looking through a couple of different news sources, but this hits all the points I wanted to. The UAW released a statement talking about, they say, UAW statement on corporate greed at John Deere. John Deere is in the tractor place. John Deere's reckless layoffs and job cuts are an insult to the working class people of Iowa and Illinois. John Deere is headquartered in Illinois, but the thing they're talking about is in Iowa. And the UAW will fight for justice for our members and communities affected by these moves. Let's be clear, there is no need for Deere to kill good American jobs and outsource them to Mexico for cheap labor. The company is forecasted to make $7 billion in profits this year. CEO John May's total compensation for 2023 was $26.8 million. The company has spent $43.6 billion on stock buybacks and dividends over the past 2 decades. There is no question that there is enough profit to go around, and Deere can afford to keep good jobs in Iowa and Illinois. So why are they choosing not to? Because Deere's corporate greed means more to them than the lives of working class people in Akani, Waterloo, Ottumwa, or Dubuque. I assume that's Dubuque. If it's Dubuque way, I'd be real happy. That'd be funny. And our government lets them get away with it, with broken trade laws that don't protect workers on either side of the border. The UAW is hard at work trying to minimize the impacts of these cuts and layoffs for our members at Deere and pushing the company to do right by our members, their families, and their communities. But when a company is doing as well as Deere on the hard work of those UAW members who make the product that generates those profits, there is absolutely no reason for job cuts, layoffs, outsourcing, or cutbacks. We will keep pushing for justice at Deere and keep letting corporate America know that the working class will not accept the scraps while the CEOs and shareholders get richer and richer. What they're referring to is that John Deere is doing, I think, 1,000-ish layoffs right now, and that is they have a project. The year isn't over yet, but they have a projected profit of $7 billion with a B, $7 billion. And the reason, if you ask corporate, that's actually why I'm reading from this statement and not for all the news articles that you can find on this are all the easily diggable ones. They will bring up all these various excuses and just, oh, well, you see, John Deere, they're going under hard times right now. Their projected profits were supposed to be $14 billion. So, and again, this is profit. This isn't gross. This is the money that they keep after everyone else is paid, all of their rents and wages, et cetera, et cetera. They're clearing $7 billion. And because they aren't going to clear $14 billion, which is what the, I guess, shareholders or whatever, like math people they hired to make up the line go up nerds, they said it should be $14 billion, but since it's only $7 billion, they're like, well, got to lay off a bunch of people. And the reason that they bring up, oh, send it to Mexico, is it just because the UAW hates Mexico and they're just taking shots at? No, the Deere company is in adding a bunch of jobs to their Mexico plants. And it's not as if these jobs are just, they aren't just like taking an Illinois person and moving them to Mexico and doing the job. Why would you instead be increasing employment in your Mexico location? Is it because you are allowed legally to pay a lower wage in other countries? Like, if you really want to, I love bringing up to anybody who's working in over 40, bring up NAFTA, because they'll be like, yeah, fuck NAFTA, that was some bullshit. Like, get a Gen Xer really hyped up. It's like, I agree, and we are still experiencing the effects. Like, there's two ways that you can get your, just blanket, start getting your wages to go down. That's either to move the labor outside of the country to a place where labor is cheaper, or to bring people in who are more desperate and willing to work for a lower wage. And we kind of do both. And that is never brought up as part of like the border conversation. What are the biggest two issues to voters right now are inflation and the border. And the entire left has just decided that if you say anything about the border at all, other than let everyone in the world come on in, that you're a horrible racist and you just can't have any conversation about it. It's like, guys, as leftists, like if you read any of our frickin' economic literature, there is a reason that foreign labor is brought in. It's not because they're like bad people who are trying to fuck up America. It's Tyson Chicken runs out of employees, and they aren't going to hire people who like know their rights and have experience within the country. they would much rather hire somebody who has flying by the seat of their pants. Yes, sir, I'll do whatever you say. Right. I will accept whatever wage and condition you give me, because that's how it's undeniably a mathematically provable downward force on wages. It's not, quote, they're coming to take our jobs. You can look at, like, I think it was shrimp peelers in, I think, Louisiana, because, like, some of that you still have to do by hand. And it used to be poor white people would do that job, and they'd get paid per hour. And then it became slaves, and then it was poor black people doing that job. And then at some point, it got changed from per hour to by weight. And now that job is exclusively done by recent immigrants. Yeah. So, like, Did someone say, you know what, I'm living here in Honduras and I want to go up north and just fuck up somebody's life and meanly
Yeah.
take that job right from them? Like, it doesn't really work like that. It's an unscrupulous company realizes that they can pay half a cent an hour less for labor if they do XYZ move, and here you go. Like,
Yeah, and
things
keep
aren't
the
just
workers
randomly
oppressed
how
and
they
enforce oppression of workers. And because we all know is capitalism 101, it doesn't work without slave labor. That is how capitalism, you build capital by exploiting it from other people.
They straight up lie to people outside of the U.S., telling them that if they show up here, they'll get a bed and a house and food and education. And we're here like, we don't get those things. This is
No.
just. I was in Brazil in the airport, and when I landed, there were signs everywhere warning about human trafficking. It's like, if you were online and somebody promised you a job with X, Y, and Z, it's like, go to the cops right now.
Go
That is a
home right
lie.
now. Turn
Like,
around.
and they straight up are
Yeah.
like, dude, you're gonna show up, they're gonna take your passport, and you're gonna become an indentured servant. And I'm like, that's what happens in America.
Yeah, dude, that is how industry works in the Western world. And but I think there might even be a worse. Well, okay, it's not a worse problem, but like it does. There's this term being thrown around now, and I think it's important, and it's called like low information voters or low information Americans. And I couldn't think like thank God that this term has come about, because not only is it going to be bandied around like who's more low information, and we're going to use this against each other, and the red and blue are going to use it against each other. But the thing of it is that most Americans are low information. Not everybody's talking like politics live. Not everybody is super invested in these things. Um, but I think maybe the worst result of that is probably the best result for capitalism, which is like if you just go talk to like somebody at the grocery store, or like working out somewhere, like if you have a service that you need done, like and things even remotely go the direction of talking about immigration, like who they might see in their daily life. There's a very common belief that um, that someone, and I don't know who they think has done this, but someone, I guess the government, has promised immigrants that they can come here and get hundreds of thousands of dollars in loan money and food stamps and health care and living. Like, these people are adamant about it. They swear that this is happening. Like, if you go to the grocery store, they're like, nobody can have benefits because they gave them all to the immigrants. And that's why nobody has anything, because the immigrants got all the money and the resources. And it's just like, are you crazy? Like, are you actually insane of a person? Like, this is a very common belief. People believe this, and it's like, do you even argue? Like, you're not going to set them straight. It's like, just like,
depending on
whatever,
depending on what municipality you're in, like if you're Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, there are programs that have been piloted. There are pilot programs where if you are a recent immigrant, like no documentation, you're here however you got here, they give you a debit card. And again, this is if you sign up, if you're within the pilot program, if you filled out the right paperwork, if you're one of the people actually lucky enough to get the thing. Some people are getting it's a debit card, and it's like $50 a month on it. It's like nothing, but there are some programs now that hand out scraps of scraps to some immigrants in some cities in very specific situations.
right?
And then you compare that to nothing for no one. Like, can you see how this is just very much, like, to me, very blatantly an engineered thing to make people fight each other, but never the bosses. It's to get poor people to fight even poorer people.
Yes.
Because they aren't doing shit for Americans. They also really aren't doing shit for immigrants. But
No one. Yeah, that's where we are. But it's like you get like you're saying, there are in some cases for some people in some crumbs that are being administered, and then somewhere some Fox News like alert goes off in these people's brains, and they get this idea that they somehow are being rewarded hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we have someone in the chat, Are You Time Traveler 2, says people say it to them all the time. So yeah, there it is right there. Like, people think that I don't even know where this idea comes from. It really sounds like a Fox News type of a story.
Remember back when who was it? The Florida man, Ron DeSantis was sending people. Was it him or something? They were like would literally fill up a bus or a plane
Well, several
with
were. Greg
immigrants and
Abbott
just
was, and he was
Abbott.
doing it, and yeah, a lot of the border cities started their border states. They're like, we'll
Well,
show them.
when they would show up in like the Hamptons, well, it's kind of ironic because, again, it's not that like oh, great! Frickin' those particular leaders have a wonderful plan to actually solve. No, they don't have anything. But it's very funny to hear certain like people who campaign on liberalism. You know, people like Kamala Harris who are like vote for me because I'm going to help the rights of XYZ groups. They will be like, oh, these horrible racists down in Florida and Texas who just complain about immigrants all day. And then when they literally bus a bunch of people up to the frickin' Hamptons, these like gated community ass towns. Suddenly those same people are like, we have a problem and we need to get all these people out of here. And it's like, oh wow, I see how much better all of you are. Isn't it great? Isn't it amazing how the virtues that you signal out into the world hold up in real life situations? Because you ended up with things where like the blah blah community center or like public school gym is like, okay, we're gonna take that gym and we got to put a bunch of people in it because we need to house them for a little bit, and then it's like, sorry, all your basketball games are canceled because we can't use the school gym this month. And what does that do? All that's going to be stuck in a bunch of people in that town's head is the illegal immigrants came and took over our gym.
Yeah,
So like it just gets you to fucking fight with other broke people. Notice none of those people in the Hamptons were forced to let them sleep in their garages,
right.
in their 9-car garage or guest house. So they didn't have to give up
guest house exactly.
Have to give up any of that shit.
It wasn't the gotcha that they thought that it was going to be, because it really pissed a lot of people off who didn't even have a stake in that. But
it's like, look, we all suck, yay.
Yeah, but at the same time, it did bring more awareness, but I think, like you're saying, negative awareness. And I think that must be where this idea is coming from. It's not like, just because we have this show doesn't mean we sit around and watch corporate news all the time. Like, I'd rather die. So
I'm a low information voter in that I don't receive a lot of information from like CNN, MSNBC.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. I agree with that statement completely. Like, no, we're obviously following what we want to talk about, and then the leftist point of view, or we're taking things out of the mainstream or maybe less mainstream to illustrate our point. Like, oh, they're even because recently even CNN even covered that, like, how the conditions are so bad in Palestine. It's like, gee, guys, I wonder how that happened. You want to back up a little bit, like 9 months, something like this.
If you give it long enough, all these people who hate Palestine, suddenly there's going to be a ton of Palestinian refugees showing up. And it's mostly going to be in Europe, but it just like creates this cycle, and it kind of works out where the people in charge kind of want that because it keeps us fighting each other rather than any kind of effective battle. My greater point is that you need to have something to say to this vast swaths of Americans who are like, illegal immigrants are showing up and there's too many and there's an issue here. And the response can't just be, you're a terrible racist.
Right,
it has to be, you start talking like, well, you see, we blow up all these other countries and then they have nowhere to go. So you end up, like, people don't show up here just for fun. They're not here to go to Disneyland. They're here because their village got burned down by some nonsense that probably spiraled out of control because we wanted coal or lithium or cobalt. And then you connect that to, you see how little is actually being done. If you start pushing a world where everyone gets to live in their own country and everyone's country is developing and making moves that is like pro people, and you have industry and stuff's going, hey, like, that's a much more, an optimistic and I would say realistic like worldview and future to work towards, rather than, no, everyone can just come and live in America. It's like, they can't though. That isn't actually a solution. The solution is not just, all right, everyone come live here. It's like, here sucks also. So like, how is that even a tenable?
Well, that's the thing. If there were legitimate resources for people to do that, they wouldn't be causing a problem that these people think that they are causing. Like, they're took our gerbs and they're taking all the food stamp money, and then we can't have health care because they got it all. Like, all these stupid ass arguments, like these low information arguments. Like, if they literally have the resources that you think that they have, you would not be discussing this right now, because it would not have even entered your mind. Because it means that there would have been resources and they would have been completely sight out of mind, and you would have never had an issue about it. So
you hear
nonsense.
They like to project. You'll see a news story where it's like, oh, blank town, like the city of Phoenix is spending $30 million on cooling centers, and then if you don't think about it too much, you're like you just get the idea that tons of money is being spent somewhere on somebody, like somebody somewhere is getting a ton of benefits from the US government, and then you look around, you're like, nah, it's basically like smoke and mirrors and money laundering, where
Yes.
they don't help anyone, claim they did, and then as a byproduct, you're out there mad about who they lied about helping.
Yeah. And it's always, they're like, they do this thing, and then a couple months later, they're like, well, the contractors that we hired, they really fucked it all up, and they took all of our money, and they didn't finish the job, and now we don't know what to do. Like, that's money laundering, guys. Like, that's literally like when they come out and they say that happened with the wall. When they come out and they say that, like these contractors that show up suddenly, they like make these bids and whatever. That's because that they use these idiots to launder money through, and then they had to blame somebody in the end. So like when that story, when they say, like you say, like, oh, Phoenix is spending all this money, and then they come through and it's like, well, where are the centers? What happened? Where are the air conditioners they were supposed to bring
It's
in?
just
Well,
the library.
They really, and it's like, you really think the government's that fucking stupid? Yeah, it's inefficient and it's too big, and everybody wants to point the finger, but yet no, there's a plan behind all of it.
I would love to know. I'd love to know where the tens of millions went for the cooling centers, because the cooling centers. Sorry to just like spin off on this is a specific one I can actually talk about. Like, it's just the library. The library stays open a little longer, and you can sit in there and enjoy the air conditioning. So it's not even like they built a $10 million facility and then like put three of them or something. There's $30 million. It's, I guess the budget is to the extra electricity and staffing needs. Like, they put some water bottles in there, but I'm like, where did they spend the $30 billion? Because you look at the results, you're like, this does not look like a million dollar. I say billion, million, 30 million.
Right.
This doesn't look like a tens of millions of dollars project. It looks like something where you're like, okay, we extended hours by a little bit, and that's it. I guess some of them are now 24 hours.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is that like, are you paying the cops to stand around outside of it? Is that where all the money went? Like, how did you manage to make this cost $30 million is really my question.
And they always manage to siphon off money for cops no matter what it is. It doesn't matter what that's why COVID money went to cops.
I don't know
they
what,
always
though.
siphon the money off to cops.
Like, did they put a bunch of swamp coolers around? There's already the air conditioners in the building, so like, what did they use $30 million on?
Chairs. They bought extra chairs.
Kids brought
30
some
million in
chairs.
chairs that are probably sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Well, just as a side note on that makes me think of, like, I remember in high school there was like the art rooms were like at the back of the building in this kind of newer part of the building. The building was older, but like, so like if they had something like they didn't like want anybody to know that they had, they would hide it back there, and then you would see like they had taken, like, I don't know, got money money allocated for them or something, and there would be all these brand new desks and chairs or supplies. I mean, stacked almost as high as the building, like hidden in the back, that they didn't want people to see that they had just replaced them with new. So whatever they were getting out of the situation, they just kept rebuying and rebuying and rebuying, and not actually doing anything that went towards education or more programs, or that didn't help out the kids who had children, or had to work, or which was everybody in that community. But those in that community, it was a full on working community. Like people were already starting their lives, and that kind of a situation. Like, they couldn't afford not to, and so that's just like a minimal example of government, how the government works, which is just keep spending and throwing money at it, even if it's inefficient. Then they can just, nobody's asking for receipts. And if they do, they don't provide them. Like we talk about the Pentagon all the time, like, blowing all this money and never really actually having, receipts. And they try to audit them. They're like, well, so it's the same. And that leads us into our other story that we were going to talk about with energy. Like that shit is just like, money. What we do in the United States really does amount to money laundering. When it comes to green energy, because we do not have real legitimate green energy policy. We don't, because our government is dictated by capital, which is dictated by the oil and gas companies, and then and the utility companies that decide, no, we definitely want all of Texas to freeze in the cold because the infrastructure can't handle it. And we definitely want black rolling blackouts because that really suits our bottom line. And we can keep taking the money off the top. And it looks like you guys are like, oh, we're so invested in this situation. Because
It's another one of those. It's almost kind of like the same technique, just applied differently, where you can take what is a legitimate grievance and like people complaining. A lot of people who have opinions on the U.S. border situation. There's not a lot of. It's low. They're low information opinions. It's like looked at from one angle, and then you can take what appear to be things that go together and just be like, boom. See, that's the issue. And if we just that doesn't look any layers deeper. If you look at the green energy situation in America, I think that is kind of treated similarly, where you have people who are pro, know nothing about it, and just blindly say, wind, solar, don't speak to me, we can fix the whole world, everything needs to be wind, solar, stop fossil fuels. And then you have other people who are like, my power keeps going out, it must be because of all this wind and solar. And it's like, well, they haven't actually been doing very much wind and solar. So no, but it could be that they shut down. At least if you're in New York, if you're in the New York State area, they've I say recently, it's been a couple years now, shut down Indian Point nuclear reactor. There's 3 of them, and I think they've shut down 2 out of the 3. And then residents around are suddenly like, man, my electric bill went up a lot. It must be all this damn wind and solar. And it's like, well, yes and no, because suspiciously, the very much not green power, the extractive power industries, your natural gas, coal, etc., they are the biggest investors in solar and wind. So, like, why is renewable energy pushed so hard by people who aren't who supposedly are opponents of it? All right, let me throw up this graph here. I already got the thing. Got to hit this button. My favorite country, my second favorite country. Favorite country is America. My second favorite country, China. It's not that China is this magic, like, this is a good country and this is a bad country. You got to look more at what are these places actually doing. If you were, as a nation, wanting to increase your, quote, green energy output and decrease your fossil fuel output, like, what are the kind of moves you would be making if you were serious about that and not just, like, saying it for weird brownie points? Well, you might be installing 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind by the end of 2030, but they did it by 2024. This chart here shows China's solar and wind capabilities. Like, if everything was banging on 100% capacity of generation, they would have 1.2, I don't want to say 1.2 thousand, 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind combined. That's their capacity. That's like if everything's running at maximum. Right. And the goal was to get that going by 2030. They got it going by 2024. So they'll just keep, as you can see by this chart, they just continue to increase that capacity. China still uses a ton of, people will throw this at me like, gotcha. It's like China's the most polluting country in the world. And I'm like, well, China's the most populous country in the world. Right. But if you look at the steps they are taking, they are definitely curbing that. Like, the curve is going down here in terms of energy mix. Right.
And they like to throw out also, well, it's not super efficient. Well, it's not efficient for, like, a consumer. Because you have to, like, if you want to have
on your
house or whatever, you obviously you have to have the materials, the panels. If it's solar, then you have to have an energy conversion system. Then you have to have a battery storage system that and then that has to connect to all your electronics. So if you've got an old house, it's like everything has to be redone. And there are places that offer rebates if you are able to pay into it in the first place. So it's like, do you have an extra spare $200,000? Like, yeah, we'll pay back some of that for you. In some states, so that's a thing too. It's the government tries to say, well, you can't do that, And I have a stat here and a quote that, because I'm always coming to the stats. So so you're like, what the hell, gigawatt? Okay, so just this to give you an idea about what that graph kind of gives you, some insight onto that. What China has managed to do, and just because they have essentially. The headline on this is they have essentially added more solar power in the last year than America has, like, in total. So what that means is they are capable of generating nearly 217 gigawatts of power, which makes for a total, and that just is what they added last year, bringing their total up to 609 gigawatts. And for America's complete capacity, America versus that is 175 gigawatts. So 609 gigawatts versus 175 gigawatts is what the numbers are right now. And for just so what does that mean? Like a single gigawatt, the measurement of gigawatt, a single one of them is enough to power 100 million LED light bulbs.
So gigawatt, like gigabyte would be a million watts, right?
Right. So
gigawatt.
It's the idea is that it's just like an insanely large amount of energy if done on a large scale. So yeah, they're really hitting it hard because, as Jared said, it's like, yeah, they're the most populated place in the world, so they have to have some sort of solutions to do that. And and being now that they're really focused in the last 30-40 years on their own infrastructure and their own growth, that's what you get when you focus on the benefit of your own people and creating a functioning society that people want to come to and live in and contribute to and pay taxes for, instead of the authoritarian, like, horrible monster society that we live in. Not to say that they're so much better, than all countries are shit basically, but but when you don't have anything, and then you look at a country with something that's like, well, why do they make it look so easy? Because it literally is that easy. And there's a literal quote on the subject from a statement because America is trying to do everything they can to stop them from doing it. Everything from giving them a bad reputation, saying, oh, well, that shit breaks down and it causes all this extra waste, and then it's not so great, and then also birds fly into turbines, and that's also not so great, and then like they'll try to make up any stupid shit, and then it's like, okay, you can just say China bad, we get it, but then that does not go far enough, so they're like, no, we got to put tariffs on the technology, so that, like, if you try to import it or if you try to say anything is like really good about it, here's how you could do it yourself, then we're going to put tariffs on it. So this is an actual quote that was included in the statement of the tariffs, which is that the tariff increase will protect against China's policy-driven overcapacity that depresses prices and inhibits the development of solar capacity outside of China. Okay, that's like a stare into the camera directly moment. Like, they made it completely affordable and accessible. So you want to put
which is bad
on it to stop people from being able to use it? Like, okay, that like, absolutely makes sense, and it's so the American way to be like, you have, and we want, and we don't want you to do it because we want to do it, but we're not going to do it. You can't have it though.
If you were actually serious, if you were supposed to be taking this stuff, this is how you end up with so many, quote, climate change deniers. Because if you look at the actions taken and what the actions you would take, like what they would be if you actually believe. Why does John Kerry go around the world talking about global warming in a private plane? If he thinks it's real, why does he have a private jet? Why does he have 9 houses? They don't take this shit seriously, so why the hell would the peasants be taking this shit seriously? Like, we all got to get electric cars. We all have to get electric cars for whatever, for kind of I want an electric car personally. But, sorry, all the best electric and most affordable, key point there, electric cars come from China, so we better put a 60% tariff on them. And it's like, is that what you would do if you really think we're all going to die by 2030 from the sun? Like,
yeah. And then you're inundated with the messaging of, well, those batteries are going to break, and then they go in a landfill, and then you're an asshole because you got one and you listen. So it's like
we really don't have enough lithium. Like, there's no way
right?
Everybody could.
That too. I mean, like, yeah, it's not. There's a lot of unsustainability here, and that's why Jared's more of an expert on this than I am. But that's why we kind of, okay, you're not going to do solar and wind, which is like the obvious go-to. They made it completely easy and accessible. They made, whatever the consequence of whatever having the cost of having to fix the materials or build better materials. And of course, there's going to evolve. The materials will evolve. We'll probably get to a point soon where you could just, paint the stuff on and then like onto anything, on any surface. Like that's probably the obvious next step, as I would think, that you just, these solar cells in paint that just absorb or whatever, and it's like we've got like asphalt everywhere that absorbs all of the heat and makes everything horrible. Like, why not just paint that shit with some sort of like solar paint? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
really not that far-fetched of an idea. We have to be, especially China and the people advancing on this, we have to be just a couple of years away from that, because you got to think about places like India, who are literally dying from heat. Like, the country itself is like almost basically, like, climate change has happened already to everybody. We see with the fires and the hurricane acceleration and all of that. But if you want to see how it's actually happening in motion right now, it's basically the living conditions in India. Their highest heats are like 130 degrees. Like, that's like normal for them. Right now, it's even here right now in Indiana, we're at the end of August, and it's not like unheard of, but we have a heat index today and the next day of 110 degrees. So, things are off. You don't have to paint that picture for people. They all know. If you grew up, in the 90s or a little before, you remember what hot and cold were, and that seasons were seasons, and they weren't exactly like that they are now, and everything is horrible. And also, there used to be bees. So, on a side note, but the fact of it is like, it's God damn it, bureaucratic bullshit, because our government is funded by these companies to make it as hard on people individually and corporations in moving forward in green technology, and where these stop blocks don't exist in places like China, where they can just go, 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 go. They've got the space, they've got the money, they've got the support. They can build things like in an hour. Like, they're really good with it. I obviously have the manpower, like, that's no question. But it's like, okay, so your climate, you're denying all this and that. Then you really can't even make the same argument against nuclear power, because that's right at this stage basically the go-between. Like, we need so closing those nuclear power plants is a really, really bad idea, and around the world they're doing it. But if you're gonna pretend like we're on the same level as China, then you can't shutter these plants, because then, as Jared said earlier, the energy bills go up. And then you get all these people saying, oh, we're so dangerous. And they start talking about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island disasters and Fukushima. And it's like, yeah, of course, it's like there's some risk involved, but there's so many stop blocks involved in like keeping people safe that's why it's not something that happens constantly. They just really want to insert that fear and say nothing else will work. We have to do fossil fuel. We have to take it from these other countries, and that's exactly what's going on in Palestine. We want to take their fossil fuels and their oil and continue to scrape the earth dry, because those companies are making so much more off of it, and they can just keep pushing it a little bit further and a little bit further until those resources are gone. But
since things are getting hotter and harder, like hotter and hotter and harder, haha. But like you approach kind of a there's two options you can go about that. You either just say, well, a whole lot of people are going to have to die, so we're gonna have because we have to bring total energy usage and consumption down, which is a code word for people have to die. Like decreasing energy usage just means fewer humans. Like there's no way you can. It's just a math problem. There's no way you can have an increasing population and a decreasing energy output. We actually need to use more and more energy. Like we need to now power a bunch of air conditioners so people in India and Indiana and Arizona and Iraq, everywhere else, can have a life where they can like be relatively comfortable and like live, like to literally just survive. You'll freaking die of heat stroke in some of these places. Which then, of course, you're using more energy to power an air conditioner, and then that feeds into this whole feedback loop, and that's where like the doomsday aspect comes in. Well, what if we told you that there was a source of energy that produced zero carbon at all and in no way contributed to rising global temperatures, and it was called nuclear energy? Right. And then what if we told you that certain countries are just stopping using it? Like if I had to make up some ideal future, it would be an energy mixture where you have fossil fuels as like emergency backup just in case everything goes wrong, and don't get another Texas where we're in a deep freeze, and you got sometimes there is very much use for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
I want situation.
You want every energy grid is going to be a mix. I want the the biggest chunk of that mix, your base load, the energy that you know you're going to be using every day in non-emergency situations, I want that to be nuclear, and I would love for renewables to be intermittent renewables to be a big part of that. There is no reason, to, especially depending on where you are, that you shouldn't have. In Arizona, we should have a big chunk of solar in our grid because 365 days a year we have bright sun. There is no reason to not do that. If you live near the coast, like offshore wind and all this stuff, like depending on your area, you're going to have a different kind of renewable. Some places don't really work for a lot of them, and you do your best here. But nuclear reactors, they run 365 days a year. They require very, very little fuel. And if I'm not getting into it today, but there's a thorium reactors. Apparently, China's figured those out, and I know it's not just China. I'm sure they got at least one in Europe, but China's the one that's actually installing stuff right now. So that's why I end up focusing on them. Why do I always talk about China? Because look what's happening in Germany. After scrapping nuclear reactors in Germany to spend billions on new gas power plants, we have these developed nations literally going backwards. We have America. It's happening too in the Great Lakes region. It's not just Indian Point. I think in Michigan they shut down another reactor, and it's just like, why? And it's environmentalists who cheer it on. Actually, RFK had a big hand in getting the Indian Point nuclear reactor shut down. He was originally, and kind of, I guess technically still is, an environmental lawyer. And guess who the environmental lawyer is working for if he wants to get the nuke plant shut down? Fossil fuel corporations. That's who wants the nuke plants shut down. Like, freaking BP and them would love if nuclear just didn't exist, because it's the only power source that's capable of absorbing that base load, just the amount of energy you're going to have to use on a day-to-day basis. And it emits nothing. Steam. It emits steam. And what about radiation? Man, I don't quite have time to go over it. It is not nearly as much as you would, I guess, assume it is. It's not The Simpsons. The Simpsons is not a documentary.
No. It's just that bad things can happen, but it's like they could happen in any way, shape, or form anywhere.
Coal plants explode too.
Well, it's like, okay, like let's just make it like a deal, like let's take all the old plutonium and just eject it into space. There, is everybody happy now? We're safe, okay?
Berlin has agreed. Berlin's agreed to spend 16 billion euros to build 4 major natural gas plants. I keep hearing how nuclear won't work because there's not enough time to build the plants, but we have time to start building these fucking gas plants. And demand major overhaul of the country's energy grid. In a statement Monday, officials said the new strategy came, quote, in addition to the consistent expansion of renewable energies, and was key to ensuring steady power supplies even in times where there is little sun and wind. There was a couple of reactors in Germany were disassembled just this last week, and you have environmentalists, I say in quotes, because you're not really an environmentalist if you want to take away the most promising, not most promising because it's been in use for decades already. It's proven itself. There's nothing really to frickin' debate here. A carbon zero source of energy, and we have to be like, no, we need to only do solar and wind because I've never read anything, and like when people do the whole like sometimes the sun doesn't shine, sometimes the wind doesn't blow. Well, kind of that's true. Like that's why Texas fucking went down. It's because they didn't have enough to cover base load.
This covers the spread. This covers the entire situation when there is no sun or wind.
Sometimes, yes, there really is not, like, you do need to have an energy source, and if it's 2 a.m. and you have to run your electric heater and the coal plant isn't keeping up, you're just effed. It's just done. And yes, if you exceeded nuclear capacity, the same thing would happen if you overstress your grid, but my guys, it is hard to overstate how stable and constant of an energy source nuclear energy is. It's basic, like there is no perfect energy source, but it's about as close as you can get right now. And once we get these frickin' thorium ones going, thorium doesn't require water to cool down the rods. It uses liquid salt, which sounds like a thing I made up, but it's kind of cool actually. Of like, oh, it's space technology.
It sounds crazy.
The whole, like, all the old barrels of wastewater, like, that isn't even a thing with, like, this next stage of nuclear. We're on, I think, they're called 4th generation nuclear reactors is what we're on now, and then the 5th gen will probably be these thorium things, but, like, they'll talk about all the steps we've made in making coal burning cleaner. Well, there's also been many, many steps made in making nuclear a lot cleaner, a lot safer.
Also, that's a talking point, too, the fallacy of clean coal. That's not a thing. Like, that's...
It might be cleaner. It might be a little better.
Maybe. But yeah, exactly. There's no such thing as that. But this, it's like this is like the obvious thing to do. But you can tell that when this is going on, and it's not just America that has this problem. Obviously, Germany does too. Like our governments are co-opted by these countries. And this again goes back to the '80s, thanks to Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and I don't know whoever was running Germany at the time because they do whatever we do. But a lot of the allied countries fall in lockstep with whatever America says to do and what America sets the example of. And when they found out you could piece and parcel off your government to corporations, that was never going to go back. The genie is out of the lamp on that one. Toothpaste out of the tube. Like once they figured out that you could sell your government to the highest bidder, then this is exactly what happens. Where we're living all these years later, and they're shuttering these nuclear true and tested scenarios. They're shuttering them to go to like a finite resource that is killing the planet. That it's not. And then, so where do you get that? Then you have to start stealing it from other countries. You have to start deciding like, well, Palestine's got some pretty rich stuff under their underground. Let's get into there. Ukraine's got some stuff going on. Like Russia's got some stuff. They got lots of stuff. Let's see if we can get in on that.
It's the fight to keep things from changing, to keep things as they have been. Because
Right.
that's the cycle. Is we have this thing, then you go get some more, but and like the U.S. doesn't even use foreign material. Like we produce all of our own natural gas and oil for now. Like right now, like we aren't even invading countries to take shit for ourselves. It's really more for like the EU needs it, Germany needs it, and freaking I can't even say France because France is one of the most like nuclear dense countries. And if you remember, we talked about this. Niger is where they get a lot of their uranium from. So it's like even with uranium production, they can find a way to make it weird and exploitative. So if you're making decisions that a country would make if they actually were trying to help with carbon and lower emissions and all those things, would you be doing this? Where is it? China's nuclear energy I'm sorry, it's always China. China's nuclear energy push lights up power shares. And if I read through this, they're talking about electricity consumption is rising in China. Should they let a shit ton of people die, or should they invest in nuclear energy so no one has to die? It's the global leader in solar and wind power installations also, but China's consumption of coal continues to increase too, which is a criticism I hear. It's like, don't say China's environmentalists. They make the most of everything. It's like, dude, they have 7 times the number of people as we do.
Right.
It is the global leader.
They need them now. That's their...
Per capita, they emit far, far less than Americans, but you guys all kind of know that. China's consumption of coal continues to increase. Coal generated a record 5,760 terawatt hours of electricity last year. I'm like, is that more than that's got to be more than giga, right? Because gigabyte, terabyte.
Yeah.
Increasingly, is that worldwide or just China? Increasingly, filling that gap with cleaner nuclear energy is seen as the answer. And then it goes on to be like, yep, they commissioned another 11 of these to go, like 30 more nuclear reactors in the next like 20 years, I think. You can see their nuclear capacity. They talk about how apparently them and Russia are like, we're both going to do this. Russia's building 15 more nuke plants. And I was shocked to learn that Russia has less nuclear capability than the U.S., because that was not true in like the 60s, 70s. So I guess the USSR stopped their intense rollout of nuclear plants at some point, or maybe that's just since the 90s. I don't know.
Well,
The U.S. already used it a bunch.
You can also guess that, like, if China came through 6 years early on their wind and solar estimates, then they're going to do the same with nuclear. It's going to happen. Like, they are obviously, like it or not, like they're like the leading standard here of how to produce energy on a wide scale for lots and lots of people, and they don't seem to be having the problems that America does, on the regular. So
Last little thing on this, it's just another aspect to think about here. Another reason that I really like nuclear power. On the plus side, China has become mostly self-sufficient in the design and construction of nuclear reactors. The challenge lies in other parts of the supply chain, especially in fuel processing and radioactive waste management, where it still needs to build out infrastructure. A shortage of specialists is another pressing issue, with the country's estimated to need up to 6,000 industry professionals each year in the next decade. So it's like the job creation. A nuke plant kind of requires a whole town of people and workers and suppliers and infrastructure. Right. So when we talk about job creation, a nuke plant makes so many jobs that you can't just, it's impossible to be like, you know what? F it. We're just going to have one guy run this whole place. Like, you can't. It's not an option, and the risk is high because people, I mean... Yes, nuclear freaking meltdowns can happen if you were to just like abandon it and not have anybody
Right.
work on it. So like it's the built-in necessity is right there to have all of these highly trained, highly educated scientists. Like these are not just like mopping the floors type jobs. It creates an entire ecosystem of employment and science and all these things that we're supposed to like and want. Development, like just the creation of a nuclear plant, like logically necessitates the like increase and pushing forward of the technology that it uses. It's a positive feedback cycle of all good things, and we should build as much nuclear as we can.
Well, that's also a labor issue, and people nowadays, they're not accustomed to the times when, in the 80s, the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even back to the 50s and stuff, when they started implementing a lot of these things. It's exactly like you said, that a whole town revolved around, working in one plant. And it's, when which were generally unionized types of work. So or just a factory town, you've all heard of that. But almost none of us have the experience of living in that situation. So, like, it's like when the corporations decided, well, we're going to take this factory out and we're going to send the work to India or China, and then this whole town collapses, right?
You can't
So,
move the nuke plant. That
it
shit
wasn't
is right
exactly.
where it is.
We're talking about labor. We're talking about the institution of labor. So, at least in this country where we have labor unions that would immediately form around these things, which would be great for workers and people in a town. Say somewhere was like, we're going to build a nuclear facility in this town, and this whole town is going to benefit from this being here, because, as he said, it's an ecosystem. Yeah, we'll be bringing in scientists and engineers that are high level, but we're also going to need people to run the cafeteria and clean the floors and do hospitality work and this, that, the other thing. There's going to be all these other sets of jobs that will need to be filled and will run the town. And that is good for labor and that is good for the economy. But because the government, no matter who's in charge of it, is so anti-labor, no matter what some of these stupid leaders say, union leaders, that is, because that's just horseshit. When they say like this person is pro-union, they're not. The government is not pro-union. Nobody is in the government, because it's antithetical to their, capitalistic wants and dreams. But if in a perfect world, if you set up a new nuclear situation, then you've created an entirely new workforce, an entire new labor union that can work for the people, and then these people can have really nice lives, like people did in the 60s through the 80s. Like when you watch the fucking Simpsons, like that's what it is. Like that was created, like that it went on the air in like 1989, and things were already.
Homer supports a family of three, family of four, his entire family with a single income, and he's a moron. Like that's half of the joke, I think.
And he works at a nuclear facility, and they have that gigantic house and a dog and a cat, and that's the whole that was based on a lifestyle and a situation, and the idea. You see the nuclear towers and the Springfield stuff, like you see it, like that town is based around the nuclear facility, because that's based on a lifestyle that used to exist that really doesn't anymore. So people don't see the value in it. They don't know about the value of it, because at this point we're a few generations removed from anybody really even being able to benefit from that, except for in a few situations. So it is also a labor issue. It's a quality of life issue. But to bring it around town here, if China can do it, why can't America do it? You like, if you think we're full of shit or whatever, and you don't believe that what we're saying is true or our version of it, okay, what is the answer then? Why can they do it and we can't do it? Why do we have to put tariffs on their equipment and their electric vehicles and stuff? Why are we trying to stop them from fixing their own shit? And then, so what is the answer? So you might have to answer that for yourself. But as far as we see it, it's obviously because the corporations that produce and benefit from these things don't want those things. They don't want labor unions. They don't want to switch to something else. They don't want to, they don't want to do it. They want to continue on the path that they're on, and it's working, for them. So
people ask, well, whenever I talk about communism, people always want to hear about, well, what's like your plan for the future? What things are all going to change? And it's like, the kind of stuff I will talk to people about, like, because I don't think there's a lot of value in trying to convince someone, like, adopt my ism, like my ism more than your ism, and you'll have a good time. It's people will accuse China of not actually being communist. Like, I don't really care what ism we're going to call it. We need to reindustrialize America. The kind of things that we would be doing under whatever the hell word you want to use would be building nuclear plants, building tractors in America. Not because I want Mexico to frickin' fail and collapse, but I want the U.S. to stop using every other country as just like a labor camp for our own nonsense, so we can further enrich the financial class. Like, the people running John Deere aren't even the people running John Deere. Like, it's not like some guy gets up and says, I will make the best tractor that I can. It's like they're like the lowest level of that shit. Above that, you have whatever union leadership, which is then goes hand in hand with whatever corporate leadership, which does whatever the bank that owns them tells them to do. I haven't even looked it up. I would bet my entire house that John Deere is owned primarily by a combination of Vanguard and BlackRock, the same investment companies that own like everything in the whole world.
Yep.
The same people who direct production away from things like nuclear plants, solar, wind, whatever, and will only allow production of solar and wind insofar as they can further the basically it's a scheme of we set it up because we know it can't handle the entire amount of electricity needed, and then they got to come crawling back to coal and oil. Like,
Right.
that's what happens. It's not just me like theorizing. That is what provably happens when they shut down your nuke plant. They ramp up the coal plant, which is more expensive conveniently for them. It's really hard to make a ton of money off of a nuke plant. Like, a lot of value is created by a nuke plant, but it mostly is getting paid out to the people working there. You can't charge a ton as much as like plutonium and all that shit like is expensive, and you have to go get it and resources and all blah blah. It's nothing compared to natural gas, coal, or oil in terms of margins. So they don't want that. They want the thing with the biggest margin. They don't want to reinvest into frickin' John Deere. They want to take their billions of dollars. They said they did $49 billion in stock buybacks. Stock buybacks are when you just buy your own company's stock, so there's less of it on the market, so the price goes up for a minute. The price goes up for like a week. You sell a bunch of shit, make your quick grab the bag, run out, and then you repeat that cycle while you're laying off 1,000 employees for basically no reason. There is no reason to. So they put out the math, and it's like the amount of stock buybacks they've done is roughly $3.8 million per employee. They could have just given each employee $3 million, and it would have cut. So like, it's nothing to do with, oh, we can't afford to pay these. The bankers tell the government what to do, who then tell you what to do, and then they shut down your factory and
then they use propaganda to tell you why China is bad.
And tell you got to go fight China and Mexicans.
Right, yeah, that they're the ones that are stealing your job. Because
Go
all
beat
of this,
up.
what this really does also is it creates scarcity. And that is another major tenet of capitalism. You have to commodify everything to make it so that people have to, scramble and fight tooth and nail, and you literally get them to that point where, you're like, people are Twilight Zoning here. Like, they're living in this place where they're like 1 minute away from killing their neighbor because they are worried that they'll get something that they won't. You got to keep people on the brink by making them think that if they don't work and scramble and go along with the plan, that the whole world's just going to collapse into Walking Dead. So
every generation in China is less on the brink. They're less freaking out.
And their life
more
expectancy
secure.
is going up.
Their life expectancy goes up.
And it's not after the C word epidemic. We don't say it so we don't get our videos bumped. But after that happened, which by the way is still very much in play, life expectancy in America has declined. Has been on the decline. It
went down by half a year. We were overtaken by China for the first time.
Yeah,
we're at like 67 and they're at like 68.
Which does have to do with the way that they handled things, which was much more methodical and planned out and organized than just being like, "Ha, fuck you guys," which was literal policy here, and it still is, and so that really kind of crossed the boundary there. And then now with them being able to understand how to support their gigantic population and their gigantic infrastructure, they are that's why their transportation system is so robust, and their their living situation is so robust. They have really figured out how to take advantage of all of that industry in the 70s and 80s coming to them. They kept the money and they've invested it in themselves. And now they have probably one of the most functional, like countrywide functional living situations and that there are anywhere,
They've
and people
taken
are
the steps that you would take if those were your goals.
right.
If
And
the
it's just
goal,
very logical, and it's hard to argue with logic. Well, like, why would you? But it's like hard to argue with logic. I mean, not that people
the
still don't.
results are there now, because in the
Yeah,
90s and 80s you could kind of theorize like, oh, this isn't going to work, but then you look and it's like, well, it's worked and
it works. It's
continues to
work like a
work.
motherfucker. This is
Like,
what working is, and it's like the whole argument is like we love in this country, we always have. And again, another thing that people forget, and I'll be quick about this, is like back in the 80s, the aura of patriotism was just very normal. Like you kind of forget that now, and it wasn't like something that was really ingrained like you see in Texas or America, oorah, like people are doing all this now to try to force it. But it was really like there were flags everywhere, and people were very patriotic, and you stood for the Pledge of Allegiance, and you did, and people didn't question it because it was very like normal, culturally visually normal. And we don't have that now because we have a lot of more people buying into that thing. But that's sort of the thing. Like they wanted you back then to just feel pride in your country and that and have reason to, but then they took more and more reason away from you to feel pride in your country. So that leads us to where we are now, but they still kind of expect it from you. But the point I'm making here is that like it's always enforced. It's that the art of patriotism and I'm a true patriot and you're not, and this that you're a communist and this and that now is like a really contentious issue. But if they like the people who believe that themselves and the government who wants you to believe that really did believe that, then what is their problem? Like why are they not number one like they used to be, like on the world stage? Like why are they struggling? Why is China doing so much better? Because it seems to me like if you wanted to look better than Russia and China, you would do things to look better than Russia and China, not trying to take their toys away. That's really what it's a brat economy, I think, at this point. Like, oh, well, we don't want you to have it, so we're going to take it. And then that's why we're on the brink of war with both of them, because we want to just stop them from being number one rather than do the work.
the
So,
kind of stuff I describe is entirely compatible with having pride in. I'd like to make the distinction of pride in the American people, because I do have pride in the American people. I think that we are essentially an occupied group that is for like under the thumb of whatever the 0.1% wants us to do. But yeah, yes, and it's like you're proud to be an American. It's like cool, me too. Let's do some stuff we can be proud of, such as building some nuke plants. Let's get our infrastructure together. Let's build a new railroad. Let's build this. Like, we used to make stuff. And when I say sentences like that, I sound like generic conservative man. But it's like, no, but seriously, if you actually have that view, if you think America should be reindustrialized, if you think we should make things here, be self-sufficient, and throw off the yoke of the financial class that currently directs production and leads to all these nonsensical outcomes, like. Yeah, I think that itself is patriotic. I think we freaking should be doing that, because that's what ends up logically leading to improved standard of living.
yeah,
Just doing the
absolutely.
stuff you need to be doing.
It gives you reason to be prideful, which a lot of us don't have at this time without, I think a lot of the people who are like, branding themselves patriots and like really, really forcing the issue are also themselves forcing the issue. Because if you were to question them about it and really have them unpack it for you, it's like, well, what really do you have to be proud of? And then you're immediately going to get into like guns and racism and shit. So it's like not like it's always the wrong people supporting the wrong things. But like I was comparing, like back in back in the 80s and stuff, it was very, very normal, very accepted, because you felt a sense of pride in that way. So it wasn't weird.
We had more industry. There was stuff that was actually still being made. I mean, I think the peak of that was somewhere around like late 60s, early 70s, and then since then and that's what I think when they talk about Make America Great Again, like I think that most people you're supposed to think of, I guess, the 70s, but if you actually go back to the 70s, that was a time of great political upheaval, because that was the height of labor power in the U.S., early 70s. It's funny that area, like in movies, the early 70s is always painted as like, oh, this rough, terrible time in the U.S. It's like, it's funny, because that's when we were the closest to being on the cusp of any kind of like worker revolution. that's
Right.
that's when like the Panthers were at the peak of their influence. That's when you had United Auto Workers were at the peak of their
Yeah.
power, and then NAFTA came through a decade and a half or so later, and maybe that's partly why. Maybe that's
Wiped
partly
everything
why
out.
Clinton and them really wanted to make sure it would be easy for companies like Ford and John Deere to export labor, to outsource, to really to exploit people who will do the exact same job for less money.
Right.
And yeah, even examine that. Why are they getting paid less? Go campaign to raise the minimum wage in Mexico, because suddenly people won't want to send their jobs to countries where they have to actually pay them.
Right.
Like,
And we blame Reagan for all of this stuff, and rightly so. We should, and everything basically goes back to him. But that's not to say that like every president after hasn't carried on that legacy, exactly like what Jared just said.
Reagan got it going, Clinton got it passed.
Yeah,
Clinton was
essentially, yeah.
going to privatize. What was he? He was going to privatize Social Security, but then the Monica Lewinsky story broke, so they couldn't get that done.
Right. Yeah. So and he was a major contributor to carrying on that Reaganite piece and parceling of the government. Like it was really a really big agenda for Clinton in the Clinton years to really accelerate that. Because if you look in between there wasn't as much competency and I guess diabolicalness going on with the leadership. So when it got in Clinton's hands, who really seemed to be able to know what to do with it, that's where that went. But the legacy has continued, and now we're up into this place where we have probably two of the most, outside of Joe Biden. I guess it started last term, but like we have some of the most incompetent people trying to get this job of presidency. And I don't. And it's kind of like it's the Wall-E future. Like where you like see it like where they just get dumber and more, like less useful, and they can't even read by the time like they get to the future point where Wall-E starts interacting with the people on the ship, like they can barely read. And
I do believe that we're headed towards, quote, neo-feudalism, because when we talk about moving backwards, how we are in general moving backwards, yeah, that was kind of if your goal isn't to have a people-directed country, you don't really need them to be educated. In fact, it's easier if you're not educated. So, like, as we move forward, I would not in any way be surprised at seeing, like, a decline in education standards, because it's a decline in everything. They no longer want educated people up there making moves and changes and innovating. They don't want to innovate. They want to de-innovate now. So it's like you live in a pod, no air conditioning because global warming. No. And
yeah,
then you
and
go to
then
work for your
yeah,
90-hour shift.
and checking into the chat, they're on board with this as well. Are you time traveling too? It says, yeah, we live in hell, which we do every single way of it, and brings up also about how every campaign tries to co-opt the song "Born in the USA," which is not a patriotic song. It's literally about all the jobs going away and everyone living in hell. So keep doing that. Same thing with the Billy Joel's "Allentown." Like people would always jump on that song as a patriotic song. It's like that's literally about the fucking like jobs going away and everything being hell. And then we have gamer Jamim, I guess. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Who says,
Gamer
why won't the system
Jame.
change? Because political corruption is too dang profitable for the shareholders, and that's exactly true, because crime does pay. So we are in agreement. Thank you, chat. So yeah, and we've gone over quite a bit of our normal time here. So Jared does have a song for us this week because he didn't feel like it, and he doesn't jump when you tell him to jump. So you guys are lucky when he gives you a performance. So, did you am I cutting you off, or did you have anything else you wanted to throw out
That
there?
is it. Make
Okay.
more, question why the path that's being taken is not the one that you would take
Right.
if you actually meant to do the things you say you're going to do. If we're going to talk about getting more carbon out of the air, build an effing nuke plant or shut up. Just stop lying to me
Right.
that you actually care about it. And I'm saying this is to the people in power. I don't get like people being. I don't really see it as necessarily your fault if you're just some random powerless worker and you don't know everything about everything. You're intentionally propagandized 24 hours a day, blasted into your face by every possible source. This is directed at people who supposedly are trying to either take power or wield power, like either like put up or shut up. Basically, I have no time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's completely true. So yeah, we kind of went into our some pseudo intellectualism there for a minute when we were like, you gotta think for yourself. What are the isms? What is the reason? But seriously though, like if you don't like our version of it, dig into it yourself. Like try to figure out, like answer that question for yourself. Like, okay, if we're so great, if we're the number one power, if America is the best in the world, why is China like literally lapping us like crazy? When it comes to energy and better living conditions and literal living standards and aging, why are they so much better at it than America? Is it because America's incompetent and can't do it, or are they unwilling to do it because, as the chat said, because crime pays, because corruption pays, and just putting in the next talking head into the government isn't going to solve that problem. We really need to start looking at, like we're always on about unionizing more stuff and putting more people in control of our own destiny, I think is what we're really talking about. So I think that about does it for my thoughts this episode. But thank you.
I am done as well. We'll be back next week seeing if, I don't know. I have no idea.
With whatever fresh hell is happening in a week. That's why it's really good for us to do just like the weekly show, because it's like, here, let's unpack this entire horrible week. Like what stupid things have happened.
We'll see what new. I'll see what new neo-Nazis endorse the Kamala Harris campaign. This week it was Richard Spencer, famously punched on camera at Trump's inauguration. Richard Spencer has endorsed Kamala Harris. Maybe we should think about why he would want to vote for her.
I'm sure that's great. It's super great, awesome thing. There's no problem with that at all.
And more Democrats are joining the Trump campaign. Like we're seeing another Southern strategy. They're just swapping again. They're just going to trade.
Yeah. The polls are shifting as far as that goes. So yeah, okay. Thank you so much for being with us for this episode, and we will be back. As always, you can our DMs are open. You can reach out to us about topics that you would like to hear us talk about, or anything like that. You can check out all of our past episodes on our YouTube channel and our Rumble channel. And otherwise, we are live pretty much every Tuesday. So we will see you next week. So take care of yourselves and think. You got to do some thinking. Bye, guys.